Have you ever wondered why some men don't have to do much, yet women are inexplicably drawn to them? Why certain relationships, though brief, leave emotional echoes in a woman's heart for years? And why some things are never taught in books, yet they operate quietly within every human heart? Because humans, and especially women, do not live by reason, they live by feeling. There are vulnerabilities that no one talks about. Tender zones in the psyche where even the strongest defenses can melt away from just a glance, a gesture, or even a well-placed silence. This video is not about tricks, nor is it about manipulation. It's about understanding. Understanding so we can see more clearly the nature of true connection. Understanding so we don't mistake softness for weakness. And understanding that, if you are quiet enough, you will see what the rest of the world overlooks. Part 1. The Power of Touch. Long ago, in a small mountain village, there lived a man. He wasn't handsome, nor was he talkative. Most people barely noticed him. Until one day, a girl from another town came to stay in the village. She had turned down every man who tried to talk to her. Until one autumn afternoon, when the old man helped her carry a heavy basket. As he placed his hand gently on hers to take it, just for a moment, her eyes softened and her heart stirred. Not because of the touch itself, but because it demanded nothing. Some men use words to win over women. Others use gifts, status, or psychological games. But the man who understands the language of presence enters a realm beyond words. A well-timed, well-placed touch is not a strategy. It is a quiet presence. When his hand lightly touches her back as he guides her through a doorway, it's more than proximity. It's a silent message. I'm here, and I don't need to possess you to acknowledge your presence. Science says touch increases oxytocin, the hormone of trust and bonding. But long before science gave it a name, instinct already knew. Women aren't drawn in by touch alone, but by the feeling of being seen without being controlled. Have you ever touched someone, not to impress them, but simply to share a silent moment? And did you realize that in those moments, without a word spoken, the other person saw your truest self? A touch could be a silent handhold, a gentle tap on the shoulder when someone is trembling, or just the way your hand rests on a table, not dominating but creating a sense of safety. Touch doesn't reside in the body. It resides in the inner state of the man, calm, unhurried, unimposing, unafraid of rejection. A man like that doesn't need to touch often, just accurately. And that woman, no matter how strong she appears, will begin listening more to her heart than her logic. Part 2. The Forbidden Effect. There's an old story. A young prince fell madly in love with a princess who lived in a castle across the river. He wrote her letters every day, sent gifts every week, waited under her window every night. But her heart remained cold as stone. Then one day, he vanished. No letters, no gifts, no goodbyes. And for the first time, the princess lost sleep. Not because of love, but because of one haunting question. Why did he stop chasing me? Strangely, what we cannot fully grasp often leaves the deepest imprint. People, and women in particular, aren't just drawn to beauty. They're drawn to what is mysterious, unclaimed, almost slipping away. A man who is always available, always waiting, always liking, always present, might earn her gratitude, but not her longing. But a man who is sometimes absent, sometimes unreadable, sometimes unneeding of her, makes her start to ask, am I special enough to make him return? It's not that he's playing hot and cold. It's that he has a life rich enough not to depend on being loved. And paradoxically, that makes him hard to possess and therefore valuable. A bit of distance isn't a tactic. It's the space where desire takes form. A bit of silence isn't control. It's the refusal to shrink yourself just to please someone else. Have you ever realized? The one we long for most is not the one who is always there, but the one who could have walked away, yet chose to stay. True attraction doesn't come from showing how great you are. It comes from having the stillness to step back, and see whether the other person chooses to step forward. What's limited is longed for. What's too easy is forgotten. Part 3. The drama that keeps her attached. There was once a man who said, "I once loved a woman deeply. I did everything to make her happy. I called her every day, checked in constantly, did everything right. Then one day she told me she felt bored." He was stunned. He didn't understand. He thought love meant being kind, caring and stable. But he forgot one thing. The heart doesn't just live on safety, it lives on motion. Women, just like men, don't always crave peace. Inside them is a constant flow of emotion, and they need someone perceptive enough to stir that current, not let it stagnate. Attraction doesn't come from simple kindness. It comes from emotional contrast. Make her laugh, but also let her get mad. Make her feel safe, but sometimes let her feel unsure. Not because you're playing mind games, but because life itself pulses with rhythm, climax, silence, explosion, surrender. A man who is too predictable, she may respect him, but a man who knows how to evoke emotion is the one her heart runs toward, even if she doesn't understand why. Remember, she doesn't need chaos, but she also doesn't need a machine. She needs someone real, sometimes calm, sometimes intense, but always present with honesty. Have you ever noticed the love stories we remember most aren't the peaceful ones? They're the ones with ups and downs, tears and laughter. That's true emotion, and true emotion can't be faked. If you make a woman feel alive when she's with you, you don't need to hold on tight, because she'll choose to stay. Part 4. The voice that controls her mind. There's something few people notice. Before a woman falls for your looks or your words, her ears are already tuning into something else. Not the content, not the vocabulary, but the tone of your voice. A man may speak very little, but if his voice is deep, rhythmic, and has pauses, even the simplest words can take her breath away. Why? Because a voice doesn't just enter the ears, it goes straight into the nervous system. Your voice is your inner state, broadcast through sound. A man who speaks quickly, anxiously, often lacks grounding. A man who speaks slowly, unhurriedly, fears neither judgment nor misunderstanding. And a woman, even without analyzing it, feels the difference. Think of a great movie. The man who leaves an impression is often the one who doesn't say much, but when he does, you have to listen. She's the same. She's not drawn in because your stories are clever. She's drawn in because your voice carries a frequency that makes her feel safe, yet keeps her curious. The most attractive thing is purposeful silence. A pause before answering. A faraway gaze before asking a question. A sigh, not of sadness, but of truth. And strangely, women remember sounds. They remember how it felt when you said, "Don't worry," with a tone they could believe in. They remember how your voice lowered when speaking of something important. And they feel drawn, not because of who you are, but because you didn't try to be anything. Your voice, when rooted in presence, makes everything you say feel deeper. Not because it sounds cool, but because it carries weight. Part 5. The hidden effect of jealousy. There's a hard truth we rarely admit, but it always exists beneath the surface of human psychology. We don't just crave what we love, we crave what others are watching too. Human psychology, especially in love, doesn't run purely on logic or ethics. It runs on subconscious competition, especially when love feels like a choice to be made. Picture this. A man is always there, always available, but no one else notices him. She might see him as kind, but not magnetic. But if one day another woman smiles when mentioning his name, if suddenly he becomes the center of curious glances, then her heart begins to stir. Not because she lacks confidence, but because now he holds a value validated by others. That's not a game. That's instinct. In nature, the more rivals chase a creature, the more it proves that creature has something worth fighting for. A man who focuses only on one woman sometimes makes her feel as though he has no other options. But a man with a rich, independent life, clear boundaries, and the respect of other women, his presence starts to make her nervous. And from that nervousness comes longing. From longing comes desire to hold on. And from there, her feelings become something she doesn't want to lose. The goal isn't to make her jealous, but to make her realize you're not a given. When a woman senses that you could belong to someone else, she begins to fight to make sure you belong only to her. So the real question is, are you living a life rich enough that you don't need her validation? And if you disappeared for a while, would she feel your absence? That's when you know you're not just there, you've touched something inside her. Part 6. The sweet spot of tension. Have you ever wondered why a great piece of music doesn't begin with the climax? Why a captivating movie doesn't reveal its ending right away? Because what draws people in is not the answer, but the waiting. Women are the same. It's not the man who impresses her the most that captures her, but the one she thinks about the most. And paradoxically, the man she thinks about the most is often the one who doesn't give her everything right away. He doesn't rush to say, "I like you." He doesn't feel the need to text every day. He doesn't try to impress. He just shows up and pulls back at the right moment. Because he understands. Attraction doesn't come from having, but from almost having, but not yet. A touch of absence. A pause in the right place. A selective presence. It spins her mind. Not because she's being manipulated, but because she's living inside a realm of emotion where anything might happen. Have you ever felt, when someone hasn't replied to your message, you start wondering? When you don't know what they're thinking, your imagination begins to wander, and it's in that uncertain space that desire is born. A wise man is not afraid of distance. He understands that waiting can be a gift. Just as fire needs air to burn, emotions need space to ignite. He doesn't give her everything at once. He guides her with rhythm. And when she realizes she wants more without knowing why, it means the connection has already settled deeper than her awareness. Part 7. The fantasy effect. A man once said, "I never told her I loved her. I never made promises." But she said she'd never thought about anyone as much as she thought about me. Then he smiled and added, "I didn't do much, I just left space." Women don't just love with their eyes or ears, they love with imagination. They don't necessarily fall for you, but for the version of you they create in their minds. That's why the man who keeps her awake at night isn't the one who tells his whole story, but the one who makes her want to know more. When you answer every question instantly, when you reveal all of your past, when you lay all your cards on the table just to prove transparency, what you lose isn't your privacy, but your mystery. Because imagination needs space to fly. A man who is hard to read, who can't be solved easily, is the man whose image lingers in her mind, even when he's not there. Picture this. You don't say much, but your eyes suggest a secret. You tell a story, but leave out one detail. You look at her longer than usual without explaining why, and suddenly she begins to wonder, what is he thinking? Is there something he's not saying? Am I someone special to him? You don't need to tell her who you are. You just need to make her want to find out. And when her mind begins to spiral through endless questions, that's when you've gone deeper than any love confession ever could. Have you ever fallen for someone unclear, but who always made you curious? Have you ever missed someone's gaze, not because it was deep, but because it never told you anything at all? Women don't fall for perfection. They fall for the story they get to keep writing with you. And to make that possible, you must leave a few lines unfinished. Part 8. The authority effect. There's a kind of magnetism that needs no bravado, no raised voice, no threat. It enters with a man who walks into a room and has nothing to prove. He doesn't ask, "What do you want to do?" every 5 minutes. He doesn't beg for space in anyone's life. He doesn't check for permission to lead, because he knows responsibility doesn't need to be granted, only accepted. Women may say they want an equal, and they're right. But deep down, when all the noise dies down, when the world outside gets exhausting, when the mind is overwhelmed, what she truly wants is a man who doesn't waver. Not a tyrant, not a controller, but someone who can simply say, will go this way. Not because he wants power, but because he's ready to be the last solid place when everything else falls apart. True leadership doesn't live in commands. It lives in the peace others feel around you. She will test you. She will challenge you, not to tear you down, but to know, if life tests me, will you still stand firm? And when you don't flinch, when you don't react emotionally, when you don't need validation to do what's right, that's when she exhales, because finally she can let go. No more pretending, no more control, no more being strong all the time. Have you ever seen a strong woman become gentle, not because she changed, but because you were strong enough for her to return to her true self? That is real leadership. No shouting, just silence at the right moment, and unwavering steadiness forever. Part 9. Emotion is an addiction. People often say, women fall in love through their ears, but that's just a small part of the truth. The deeper truth is, women fall in love with what they can't predict. And within that, nothing is more powerful than emotion. Look back at the relationships that left a lasting mark on you. They weren't necessarily the longest lasting ones, but the ones that made you feel alive. The man who creates emotion isn't the one who tries to make a woman happy all the time. He can make her laugh, but he can also leave her quiet. He knows when to step back and when to gently touch a memory deep inside her. And those rhythms are the emotional dopamine hits that keep her coming back. No one gets addicted to stability. We get addicted to fluctuation. Like a whirlwind, like ocean waves, rising, falling, never still. A man who's too predictable may earn her appreciation, but not her confusion. And sometimes it's that very confusion that she remembers the longest. Have you ever found yourself drawn to someone, not because they were perfect, but because they made something inside you come alive every time they showed up? Women feel the same. They're not obsessed with you because you're nice. They're drawn to you because you make their heart skip its rhythm. A man who understands this doesn't need many pickup tricks. He only needs to show up like the wind, sometimes soft, sometimes strong, but always stirring her soul. This isn't a game. It's the truth about human emotion. Part 10. The submissive instinct. She's strong. She's independent. She can handle her life, go wherever she wants, and doesn't need anyone to feel complete. But that doesn't mean she doesn't long for rest. Not rest from work or responsibilities, but rest from always having to be strong. When a woman says, "I want a strong man," she often doesn't mean muscles. She means an inner state she can trust, to be small and still safe. Because no matter how modern the world becomes, deep within her instincts, a woman still longs to be led, not because she's weak, but because she wants to feel protected. And what allows her to surrender isn't domination, but steadiness. Not loud, not performative. Just a man who enters a space and brings with him the energy that says, "You can let everything fall, and I'll catch it." You don't need to impose your strength to make her soften. You only need to stand still and not waver. Don't apologize for your firmness. Don't shrink your boundaries when tested. Don't become smaller in hopes of being loved. That's what makes her feel she can finally be a woman in the truest, most beautiful sense of the word. And the strange thing is, when she feels safe, when she trusts and lets go, she won't even know why. She'll just feel, next to this man, I don't have to be a warrior anymore. Closing. And after all, there is no formula that will make a woman love you forever, because love, by its very nature, cannot be controlled. But there is one thing you can do. Become the kind of man she'll never forget. Not because you're perfect, but because with you, she gets to be herself, in her most feminine, honest and unguarded state. Don't try to make her love you. Live in a way that makes you respect yourself. And that is the only kind of magnetism that lasts. Thank you for listening. If you found value in these reflections, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next insights. The journey of understanding others begins with understanding yourself.